Spanish people, you are going to hate this podcast, but that's okay. I can take it. See, a couple of years ago, I wrote an article about all the things I love about Spain, my adopted home country. It's on the blog expatmadrid.com. It's called 32 Reasons Why I Love Spain. The article went viral, which was great, but what most people don't understand is that it was a response to those humorless folks out there whose knee-jerk reaction to anyone saying anything negative is, if you hate Spain so much, why don't you just go home? I had said something in another article about how Spanish flats tended to be small, or Spanish breakfasts were unconvincing, or something equally trivial. And goddamn did I get yelled at by a ton of Spaniards on social media for that. So I wrote the article as a love letter to Spain, in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, to respond to the haters, even though I clearly meant it. I do love Spain. And of course, Spanish people love to complain about their corrupt politicians, their terrible economy, their waiting more than 5 minutes for free medical care, and stuff like that. But apparently they expect all us Gearys to write nothing but gushing articles about how everything in Spain is so fun all the time. OMG. If we don't write that article about how everything in Spain is so fun all the time, OMG, we receive the full brunt of their pathetic Facebook wrath, which, if you're a person like me, is kind of amusing. It doesn't seem to matter if you say dozens of positive things about their country in the same article. It's that one negative thing, that one time you complain about small Spanish breakfasts, that makes them completely lose it and scream, "Yankee, go home." Don't consider paella to be one of humanity's greatest accomplishments? Go back to your country, moron. That is the level of discourse. Oh well, as my girl Miley says, approximately, only God can judge ya. So forget the haters and keep on twerking. And so I shall. I'm Daniel Welsh, and this is Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse about all things Spain. And I'm here in Barcelona. It's another hot summer day. It is what the Italians refer to as Ferragosto. In Madrid, it is La Paloma. It has something to do with the ascension of the soul of the Virgin Mary to heaven, because she was born without original sin, and therefore the purity of her soul rose straight to heaven without passing through purgatory beforehand. This is unusual in the human experience. I believe only the Virgin Mary has managed to do this. It's a long story. Catholicism is not something I am a huge expert in. However, on this episode of the Spain to Go podcast, we will be talking about something else. We will be talking about the 4 things I hate about Spain. So, happy Assumption of the Virgin, and I hope you enjoy this one. First thing, I should get out of the way that I talked to many friends about this, and we all love Spain. In fact, we all basically agree that life in Spain is 95% awesome. After that, there are just a few things we don't like. Take note, for example, take note of the fact that my love letter to Spain has 32 positives, whereas this only has 4 things I hate about Spain. This article or podcast only has 4 things. Only 4. And that's after thinking about it pretty hard, talking to my friends, and spending nearly 18 years at this point living in Madrid and Barcelona. I'd say that's a pretty good ratio of things I love to things I hate. So, I hope you don't think I'm being unfair. Let's get started then and prepare to be outraged. The first thing I hate about Spain: the terrible salaries and the terrible work schedules. Well, working in Spain kind of sucks, and Spanish people complain about this one all the time. You might be working from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. with an obligatory 2-hour lunch break, which would be fine if you lived in a small town and could walk home for the siesta, but if you are in a big city, it doesn't do much for you. The culture of presentismo is something that people complain about. That basically places a high value on showing up early and staying late. It doesn't necessarily matter how much you do or if you get anything done at all during the day. Your boss might just be impressed if you clock long hours. And hey, have I mentioned the terrible salaries? I'm sure I have, and I will continue to do so. In many cases, these salaries do not even break 4 figures per month. If they do break 4 figures per month, they might barely break 4 figures a month. I've been around for a long time, so I know something about it. Back in the day, back in the early 2000s, I remember when people would complain about their €1,200 a month salaries. We called it being a mil eurista earning 1,000 euros aproximadamente. Usually it was between 1,000 and 2,000 a month, but realistically most people were sort of in the 1,000 to 1,500 range per month. That was something people complained about back in the early 2000s. Afterwards, the economy went into the tank. You can hear my previous episode, revisiting the Great Recession, for more about that. And suddenly, earning 1,000 euros a month was a luxury that few could aspire to. Tough times for everyone there. Would you like to hear about something even worse? I've got a link on the blog to an article about the 10 poorest towns in Spain. Incidentally, 9 of them are in Andalusia. The article starts with a story about a woman who's confronting the mayor of her town over the fact that she is basically going hungry. She has a couple of kids who are going to school with half a glass of milk watered down with half a glass of water for breakfast. They live in an occupied house, which is more common than you would think. And at the time of the writing of that article, I believe it's in La Vanguardia. No, it's in El Español. It's in El Español, and I'll just give you the title so you can Google it and read it if you would like to. It is called Viaje a los pueblos con más pobres de España. You could probably find it just by putting that into your Google. Or you could go to expatmadrid.com/hate, which is not the proudest URL on my website, and you've got all of the links that I talk about there. It's the link to the article on which this podcast is based. Anyway, the 10 poorest places in Spain. According to that article, there are more than 1 million people in Andalusia who are living on less than 332 euros per month. 332 euros per month is not very much money. There is no way they are paying rent on something like that. If anything, they are probably living in an abandoned building or occupying something. I've seen documentaries about people who live in cemeteries or in industrial parks. You can barely feed yourself in the most basic way on 332 euros a month. Some of these people are feeding families. So it is a heartbreaking situation to hear about this sort of poverty in an otherwise developed country. So, sorry, Spain, you need to get your act together. Anyway, my experience with Spanish work culture and terrible Spanish salaries was always as an English teacher, so I've never worked in an office. I've also never experienced extreme poverty. However, my salary was not anything to brag about, and neither were the work conditions. I had long days taking the bus out to some class in the suburbs, terrible pay, and bosses who treat you like you've just fallen off of the lowest branch of the tree of life. In fairness, at least some of the staff at the language school where I worked probably had just fallen off of the lowest branch of the tree of life, but I guess that's a story for another article. Working in Spain is tough. Spanish salaries are tough. It's not the reason why most people come here. Moving on. Non-existent customer service is the second thing that I hate about Spain. You know those times when you go to a bar and the hostile white-haired waiters spend 20 minutes ignoring you? Then when they finally do look your way, they act like they're doing you a big favor. You know when the shop assistants do their best to avoid eye contact with customers and basically refuse to do anything resembling service? They're busy taking a personal call. How could you expect them to do their jobs on a weekday at 11 a.m.? It's happened to all of us, enough that I have 2 articles about it on the blog. They're called You've Been Spained and also Adventures with Customer Service. You can go to expatmadrid.com/hate for those links also. I think about customer service that the larger problem is that for the most part, Spanish marketing is stuck in the 1940s, by which I mean it doesn't really exist. The older businesses are firmly entrenched in the mentality that all they have to do is open the door and someone will walk in and spend money. I'm sure you might have seen these small neighborhood businesses in your neighborhood in Spain. If you live here, you might have a merceria or something that's selling, underwear to old ladies. I guess the system of just opening the door and waiting for customers probably worked pretty well in the time when those old ladies were young, in the time when they had food rationing in the post-war, and if you had something to sell, that was a rather rare occasion and people would be around to buy it. However, this is the 21st century and a complete lack of marketing and innovation is part of what's killing the old man bars, the local markets, and the independent shops. People complain, myself included, about the ridiculous gastro bar fad, but the fact is those places are doing something right. If you haven't changed anything about your business in 40 years and you don't believe in marketing or customer service, then good luck to you. I'm not going to cry myself to sleep about that big bully gentrification when I see your shop shuttered and up for rent. That's all I have to say about customer service for today. Let's move on. Thing number 3 that I hate about Spain is all the noise. The garbage trucks rumbling and crashing down your street long after midnight. The kids leaving the disco at 5 a.m., shouting, singing, and smashing bottles on the sidewalk. The jackhammer that starts pounding on the pavement right outside your window at 8 a.m. sharp. The restaurant with a tiny dining room packed to the gills with people of all ages talking all at the same time, shouting, in fact, at the top of their lungs to be heard over the racket of other people shouting. Your neighbor, passing a leisurely Saturday afternoon listening to Despacito on repeat with the windows open. The old emphysemic coughing his or her smoker's lungs out on the other side of a paper-thin wall, while upstairs on the other side of a paper-thin ceiling, your other neighbors are loudly having intercourse. Madrid is noisy, and so is Barcelona. And either you learn to shout back, or you spend your quiet Anglo-Saxon life frustrated and alone, with waiters ignoring you and dinner dates thinking you're way too timid to be relationship material, or even intercourse material. More than once, while traveling, I've had problems with friends for being way too loud in their city. If you take your Metro de Madrid voice onto the London Underground, people will take notice. You will be the loudest guy on there, and they won't always feel positively disposed towards you. My excuse is that's just how we talk in Spain, so sue me. We have to be loud to cut through all that other noise. But be warned, your friends from other countries in Europe might not appreciate it. Finally, Spanish politics. Oh God, Spanish politics. Spanish politics is thing number 4 that I hate about Spain. Spanish politics is a joke, and not a very funny one. From the ponytailed class warriors in million-dollar homes on the far left, to the actual walking undead who were fairly recently running the country from the right, Spanish politics is just one bad joke. And don't even get me started on our current president, Pedro Sanchez. Anyway, I remember a bucolic afternoon several years ago when I was on vacation somewhere. During lunch, the story broke. We saw it at the bar where we were having lunch on the TV. The story broke that then Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy had been texting Luis Bárcenas, the ex-treasurer of the party, who was and still is in prison for funneling money out of the country, and apparently had also been handing envelopes full of cash to party members. This was during the big real estate boom. All the parties apparently had a lot of extra money coming in from undisclosed sources, and it's been under investigation for a long time now. Anyway, Bárcenas was in prison, and our own prime minister was texting him. I guess they have WhatsApp in prison also. Our prime minister was texting him something along the lines of, "Be strong, Luis. We're pulling for you. Hugs and kisses." That's a paraphrase, but it was something along those lines. It was not the kind of thing that you would expect from somebody who had spent the past couple of years denying that he had anything to do with any of this corruption. Publicly, the Popular Party had fired and disowned Luis Bárcenas long before. "Those are his Swiss bank accounts, and we know nothing about them," was the official story. Now the Prime Minister was telling him to stay strong during the trial? That looked pretty bad. Surely, I told my then-girlfriend, he's gonna resign. I spent a large part of that afternoon refreshing El País on my phone, waiting for Rajoy to step down so that a new, less corrupt government could form. He didn't step down. Different countries have different tolerances for corruption in their government. In Spain, the fact that this Luis Bárcenas fellow had a ledger with cash payments to important party members that were untraceable and going back years, this did not seem to matter for the longest time in Spanish politics. Well, so he didn't step down. It took several years, and it was only in 2018 when he was finally forced out of office. He was forced out of office for something related to this same story. It's such a long thing. I lose patience after a few weeks of these stories, and they tend to drag out for years. So I don't remember exactly what it was. But several years later, after the infamous text messages to his former accountant in prison, Rajoy had to step down. Now, I should mention, presumably people from all parties, or at least most parties, were rolling in the dough during the big real estate boom, and these investigations have been going on for a long time. Occasionally someone goes to prison. Most people don't, and there's not apparently a huge incentive to not be corrupt, or at least there wasn't back in the day. Tax fraud is a fairly popular thing here in Spain, and the government is not doing all that much to stop it, at least on the small scale, because they might be the first ones who would have to pay the fines. On the other hand, on the other side of the political spectrum, we have the leftists who promise big things, but mostly just end up raising their own salaries and then splitting their parties into ever smaller segments. And we have the Catalan separatists who spend most of their time trolling and then refuse to go to meetings with the central government. Occasionally, they're busy setting fire to things during riots in my neighborhood here in Barcelona. It's suboptimal, let's say. It's not what I would choose for a political system here in Catalonia, but I'm sure other countries have problems too. The caveat on this section of the article is basically that this section of the article constantly frustrates me because every 6 months the political situation has changed so much that whatever I write in this section of the article seems quaint and old-fashioned. If I upload this podcast in August with any sort of specific commentary about specific Spanish politicians, it's very possible that by September it will all seem like old news and we'll have completely different people to complain about. So I'm keeping this very non-specific. What I wanted to say is Spanish politics is a joke, and just the continual jokiness of it made me lose hope long ago, made me lose my enthusiasm for politics long ago. These days, in summer 2022, a lot of people are hating on the president of the Madrid community, Isabel Díaz Ayuso. I'm not exactly certain what they dislike about her. I find her to be charismatic at the very least. In any case, politics moves so fast that anything I say about Ayuso or anybody else will seem quaintly dated by the time you probably read it. When I mentioned the ponytailed class warrior at the beginning of this section, he has since retired. He has cut off his ponytail. He's still living in his $1 million home, but I believe he has a job working as a commentator on some Spanish TV show. I'm not really sure. I do not own a TV. Anyway, that's it. That's the 4 things I hate about Spain. Of course, there might be a couple more things if I were feeling particularly whiny today. I could complain about Spanish bureaucracy, but then again, I've never heard anybody talk about the efficiency of bureaucracy in their country. I think slow, inefficient bureaucracy is probably a human universal. The recent coronavirus situation wasn't very fun here in Spain, but I'm sure a lot of countries have done worse. Some have done better, certainly, but a lot of countries probably worse. And anyway, as I've made abundantly clear, here and everywhere else, I love Spain. Despite its problems and annoyances, I love Spain. No country is perfect, but Spain has a lot of good things going for it. And there are literally hundreds of geary bloggers who will make lists of their favorite rooftop bars and tell you how fun everything is all the time. OMG. However, in the interest of creating some meaningful dialogue, I wanted to put this out here. I know not everyone's going to like it, but to paraphrase my business guru Dan Kennedy, if you haven't pissed somebody off by noon every day, you need to work harder. So, that is me being polarizing. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have a great day out there, wherever it is you are in the world. Enjoy the Assumption of the Virgin, or whatever other day it is by the time you're listening to this. And maybe head by my website, expatmadrid.com, to read more. You could go to expatmadrid.com/donate to send me a little bit of money to support this podcast. You could send me a lot of money to support this podcast if you wanted. I wouldn't have any complaints. It's a site where you can buy me a virtual coffee or a virtual vermouth. If you prefer, it's virtual. It could be any liquid you choose. You could buy me 1 virtual vermouth, or you could buy me 100 virtual vermouths, and I promise not to drink them all virtually at the same time. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Enjoy, subscribe, give me a like or a star rating wherever you're listening to this if possible. And until next time, from beautiful Barcelona, bye.